Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing.
You know, when I started the Kung Fu Cinema segment on this show, I was mostly expecting to find movies that were easy to laugh at. You know, those movies that were so hilariously bad that they were just awesome. But over the past few reviews, of which I have done few, admittedly, I've mostly been getting ones that are just so bad they're boring. And unfortunately, it looks like this one isn't really going to break the chain. One thing I can say about this one, though, it's probably the most obscure martial arts movie I've done yet on the show. And that's saying something. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ninja Heat. Well, since I can't find anything resembling a history or any production notes regarding the film, let's just start off with the plot, shall we? It revolves around a pair of brothers, one of whom who was just released from prison after being accused of a bank robbery that he did not commit. However, he and his brother know the people who were responsible and decide that they are going to get revenge for all the wasted time he spent in prison by killing everyone in the gang. Now, for right now, let's just ignore the completely logical fallacy of the fact that if they knew who these people were, they most likely had evidence about what they had done and probably could have gotten him out of prison a lot sooner and probably could have gotten the gang thrown in prison with this evidence. But trust me, that is one of the least serious logical fallacies that is in this movie. And instead, let's focus on something that I find very frivolous and yet very irritating. During that description of the plot, which, by the way, is not a condensed version, that really is all the movie is a revenge flick, where did you spot the word ninja? Because I didn't see it anywhere. Yeah, it's one of those kinds of movies where the word ninja is not even mentioned in the entirety of the movie. It's just put into the title to try and sell tickets because ninjas are cool. Now, like I said, the movie is standard revenge flick fare with some martial arts thrown in, and it doesn't really try to break out of that niche genre. For the entire movie, we're watching these two guys hunt down each of the main gang members who wronged them in their past, and watching them kill them off with kick-ass martial arts. Allegedly. Now, I'll get to that in a bit. But the problem is, there really is not a whole lot to this movie because the characters just aren't that engaging. I mean, if the characters had been interesting, we might have felt a little more for this guy and his plight, but here, it's just not pulled off very well. We only spend a very brief amount of time with each of the villains before they're killed off, and we never learn anything about our main characters beyond the fact that they want revenge against this gang. And one of the brothers is so single-minded in his approach to this, it almost becomes obsessive, and to a point even psychotic. Ironically, the movie also tries to get us to sympathize with the people who are getting killed off here, despite the fact that we are told and shown multiple times with each of them that they are pretty despicable people. Gamblers, thieves, murderers, etc., some of them cheating on their girlfriends. But even then, the movie tries its best to make us feel sorry for the fact that these people we barely know as anything more than scumbags by flashing pictures of their wives, girlfriends, their families just before they die off, and that's somehow supposed to invoke sympathy. Now, the movie does this with each of the villains, except for the main villain, who we don't even see until the last fourth of the film. But in doing so, it's actually kind of disconcerting, because it makes me very confused on who I'm supposed to be rooting for. I mean, is the film trying to say that our heroes are actually the villains for killing these people off when they have loved ones despite all the bad that they've done in their lives? The movie does sort of play up this issue of morality, but it never really takes advantage of it beyond the cliche, and we never really get an answer for whether what they're doing is right or wrong. Well, of course it's wrong, but the movie doesn't explore why it's wrong. In fact, more than once it's shown that they actually get away with what they're doing, once again bringing up the question of why the police never get involved in this movie, even when these gang members are now very influential people in the society they're living in. The fact that I don't care about the plot or the characters is not helped by the fact that the dubbing in this movie is actually pretty embarrassing. I mean, it's never really good in these low-budget martial arts flicks, but here it's even more embarrassing, and it's the only thing that'll really get a chuckle out of you.
What? That's right. Quanto murdered Mum, and she helped him! That bitch, your old girlfriend.
This isn't helped by the fact that our main character, who, by the way, doesn't even have that many lines in the movie, actually sounds like he's doing a bad Vincent Price impersonation through most of it.
They robbed that jewelry store, shut down the guard, then planted some of the jewelry in my house.
But when your video heads get dirty, you lose your picture. Not a pretty sight.
And if that voice clip didn't really give you an impression, then please feel free to listen to a bit more of the soundtrack and revel in how wonderfully clear the voice recording is in this movie. Maybe that clip will finally be the thing that gets me banned off of YouTube. Anyway, that pop song that you just heard, that also makes up a majority of the soundtrack of this movie, and it plays every time that a main villain is killed. And it is played in its near entirety every time. Which brings me to another big problem about this movie, its length. The martial arts movies really don't have to have that long of a runtime. Many of these low-budget ones clock in at just under or over an hour. But this one decided to go the extra mile. It clocks in at just over 2 hours in length, mostly due to the fact that it is padded as hell. Now, don't get me wrong, this would be fine if it was actually used to develop the characters a little bit, but instead, it is just used to the worst effect possible. Many of the scenes between action stages are used to introduce characters that are never really followed up on, or just to watch the characters stare blankly into space, not saying a word, while the shots run overly long and we just wait and wait and wait for them to do something, and yet nothing ever happens. And because I really want to drive home just how much padding there is in this movie, and because I'm also feeling particularly vindictive tonight, you are all going to suffer as I have suffered. Witness the entirety of the opening of this movie, from the moment it starts to the very first line of dialogue. Enjoy.
Brother.
That was exactly 1 minute from this movie. This movie is so heavily padded that you could probably market it as a tampon and people would take that seriously. But once again, this is a martial arts movie, so, well, people might be able to forgive all of the boring padding in this movie if the martial arts are engaging and well choreographed. So how does the actual action in this action movie hold up? It's good, kinda, sorta, maybe. I mean, there are parts of it that I like, but there are also parts of it that I really don't. First major problem is the fact that a lot of the early fight scenes are filmed in areas that are pitch black, or just really, really dark or low light conditions, such as inside a nightclub where we get some really nice lighting effects, but we don't see a whole lot of action because of the heavy shadows. Heck, it's almost impossible to tell how the fight with the first villain goes because it's filmed in a street, at night, with no street lights around, and apparently nobody on the crew thought to bring some flashlights or something. That being said, a lot of the fight scenes in the latter half of the movie are actually filmed in the daytime and are very visible. Many of them are actually very well choreographed, and to my surprise, they actually look very realistic, like I was actually watching real martial artists at a real martial arts tournament, even though this is a fight to the death, of course. But as you can imagine, what little tepid praise I can give this movie is equally drowned out by something terrible in the same category. See, the padding that I was talking about does not only exist in those boring talky bits, but they also exist in the fight scenes themselves. You might be wondering, how is that possible? Well, as much as I enjoy action scenes quite a bit, a lot of these ones just overstay their welcome, with many of them devolving into chase scenes with occasional stop-and-start fights happening. Now, granted, some of the locations they chose, such as the rooftop fight near the end of the movie, are actually very well done, but the main problem is that it just goes on too long, and you're just wondering, when is it going to end? And they just basically start repeating themselves in the fight. There's no real flow to it, there's no originality to it, it just becomes boring to watch, which is something that you never want to say about a martial arts action flick, especially during the martial arts scenes. And that is about all I have to say about this movie, really. I feel kind of bad that I don't have more to say about it, but really, there's not a whole lot to it. When I first sat down to watch this, I could not begin to imagine just how terribly boring it was going to be. Everything from the shoddy production value, to the poor sound quality, to the horrendous acting and voice acting, really, it all screams B, C, even D-grade schlock. And really, even if you're not into that kind of thing, I think we can all admit that there's always something there. Always something to that kind of movie that we can sit down and laugh at, even if it is ironically. Here, there's just nothing to like. This is a failure as a revenge flick, a failure as a drama, and a failure, most disappointingly, as a martial arts film. Well, my last few reviews haven't really been what you would call uppers now, would they? You know what, next time, forget reviews, we need to do something a bit happier. We're going to do a top 10 list. And you know what? We're going to do it on possibly one of my favorite Japanese television shows of all time. So I'll see you all next time, and be ready because we're taking a look at Game Center CX.